Hey everybody, KC here. So I've kind of struggled with whether or not I should do this FaceTime, to be perfectly honest with you, but I've decided that at the end of the day, I really need to do it. This is something that I need to talk about, and quite frankly, it's something I think we all need to talk about. I think it deserves to have light shed upon it. Not just light, but quite frankly, a harsh spotlight. And I also want to be clear about something else. This is not about politics. This is really about what I think of as being lowest common denominator thinking, lowest common denominator feeling. Now, here's the framework. The Financial Times recently did a story about how companies in the United States are basically adjusting their policies to adapt to a shift in the winds of power. And listen, one can agree with that or not. I've made my opinions clear here on Morning Newsbeat to a certain degree about certain things. You know how I feel. But here's the passage that I think basically sets it all up. And I quote, "Companies are scrapping diversity, equity, and inclusion departments, cutting their support for racial diversity charities, and dropping out of climate change groups. They're also scrubbing anything that could be perceived as woke from public statements, corporate documents, and advertising." Now, I think that's a pretty fair assessment. And you can agree with whether or not they should do that or not, whatever you think. I get that we're all going to have different feelings about that. And a lot of the people who were quoted by the FT were quoted by name, but one person wasn't, and I think for good reason. And here's the passage. And again, I quote, "I feel liberated," said a top banker. "We can say retard and pussy without the fear of getting canceled. It's a new dawn," unquote. Liberated? Liberated to do or say what exactly? I find that statement to be absolutely breathtaking in its stupidity, its lack of feeling and compassion, and its disrespect for anybody who is not like the person who is making that statement. The thing is, it's certainly a man making those comments, and it's somebody who's in some sort of leadership or management position at the bank where they work. So let me actually parse the statement within those two specific parameters. Number one, I would argue that statement is at odds with any definition of leadership that I can imagine, or at least with my definition of it. And I think it's at odds with any definition of being a man, at least my definition of being a man. If my sons thought, felt, or talked that way, I would feel like a failure as a father. And if I had friends who talked that way, well, I kind of wonder about the foundations of our friendships. Now listen, and I'm not arguing that one should only be friends with people who feel and think the way you do. Far from it. Most of my friends, frankly, feel differently about a lot of issues than I do. I'm even friends with some Yankee fans. So I paint with a pretty broad brush. But these comments, as far as I'm concerned, reflect a level of cruelty, a lack of basic compassion, some sort of cartoon version of macho that I think defines a lot of what's wrong with the world today. And I'm not talking about political correctness here. I am talking about basic human decency. Now, I'm sure the top banker who made those comments basically thought he was radiating some sort of masculine energy when he said it. But you know, masculine energy doesn't have to be toxic. Masculine energy can be kind. It can be aspirational for oneself and others. It can be compassionate and respectful. It can lift others up instead of putting them down. Masculine energy doesn't have to be hateful or braggadocious, callous and vile. Listen, I would hope that most of the people who read Morning Newsbeat, or at least and certainly in the industry about which we write here, would not think, act, or talk that way. I really hope that. But if they do, I'm going to be honest with you. They're lousy examples of leadership. And quite frankly, I think they're lousy examples of being men. Anyway, that's what's on my mind. And as always, I want to hear what's on your mind.